The Field of 68 Media Network presents Red is the New Orange, a Syracuse basketball podcast.
Vince intercepts a pass, breakaway for the freshman guard, he flies and slams! Aerial assault from Judah Mintz.
Looking to go back door to Bell, they get it to a near corner three, knocks it down! Chris Bell, the sharpshooter.
Bringing you everything you need to know out of the 315.
Up top, Williams surges ahead, up with the right hand and in. A pretty up and under move from Benny Williams to beat his man.
Over to Taylor. He skips into the lane, puts up a floater, it drops in.
Let's get it started with your host, Ian Unsworth and Johnny Gadamowitz.
Well, Syracuse men's basketball is one game into its ACC slate, and Syracuse men's basketball is 0-1 in ACC play. It is a 69-64 loss to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish out in South Bend from over the weekend. Hey, what's going on? Johnny Gadamowitz, Ian Unsworth with you as always. Here on Red is the New Orange. You know the drill. Drop us a like, drop us a follow, drop us a subscribe. We're on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, Field of 68 Podcast Network. You know by now, if you found us, all the great content that the Field of 68 has for you over the course of the next couple of months. Syracuse loses this game. It was a close game. It was an entertaining game, but it was kind of what we thought it would be, Ian. Not enough offense down the stretch. Bad basketball. All you got to do is go watch that final Syracuse offensive possession that we were texting about in real time, and that was pretty emblematic of where this team is right now.
Yeah, that last, I guess the last couple offensive possessions, because it wasn't like the last one. But when Syracuse was down one possession and they had the ball on the right end, they just kind of ran side to side. And no one exactly looked like they wanted to take the final shot. And it ended up in Jaquan Carlos's hand. I mean, you can just hear from my tone of voice. It wasn't good.
Very gross.
Nobody wanted to take the final shot. That's what happens when your leading scorer isn't playing. Even though Jair Davis and Donnie Freeman both had great days, neither of those guys expected to have the ball in their hands. And I don't even think Davis got a touch on those final possessions. Like, Donnie Freeman is a great player, but he is not Cooper Flagg. You can't throw it to him and say, hey, go beat this senior off the bounce. It's just not in his skill set yet. It will be, but it isn't right now. So the effects of J.J. Starling's absence have really hit the team, because down the stretch, no one scores. And you end up with possessions like that, which are hair tearers. Frustrating.
The Orange do score 38 points in the second half, but Ian, I think we're on the same page where this is not an even though game. This is not a let's find the bright spots game. This is a macro, big picture, this might be worse than we thought kind of game. And I know the Starling injury obviously increases it all tenfold, but this is a sad state of affairs. And I don't want to, go nuts here, because at the end of the day, it is still December 10th as we release this ahead of the UAlbany contest tonight. But there are not a lot of things that I can point to about this team right now that get me excited. I'm not even saying for wins or for tournament or for bubble. I'm just saying to get me excited, period. I know you hung with Texas. I know you hung with Texas Tech. Even this game, it wasn't a blowout, but I think this is probably the game, for me at least, and you could debate it, but I walk away from that is the most alarming loss, just because of the way of how it went down and the bitter taste that it kind of leaves in your mouth.
Yeah, there are a lot of problems on both sides of the ball, but mainly offensively, that are going to be season-long problems, not just things where you say, oh, this was a game planning thing, or Notre Dame just had the hot hand today, and they have one player who's really, really good, who guarded the ball extremely well. No, this was more of a symptomatic Syracuse thing. Starts with a 3-point shooting, or lack thereof. 0 for 9 from 3. I mean, Johnny, what's the bigger problem? The fact that you don't make any, or the fact that you only take 9?
Well, you can almost kind of understand why they're only taking 9 because they don't have confidence, right? Like, yes, this isn't a 3-point shooting team, but at some point, shots are going to have to start to fall. And shots aren't going to have to start to fall until you start taking said shots that are not getting up right now. So it's that whole chicken or the egg thing. And you can blame the philosophy or you can blame the lack of execution. For me, it's both. One of our great colleagues at the Field of 68, Jeff Goodman, put out a really alarming tweet today. That's just numbers, no takes or anything, just numbers. But I'm going to read it aloud here, and I really want you to let it marinate. Syracuse ranks 348th in the country in both three-pointers made and in three-point percentage, while the Orange ranked 327th in three-pointers attempted. Below three, that means there were more than 300 teams better than them in that regard. Again, I'm not asking you to shoot the lights out, but I am asking you to just be competent. And competency is not something that the Orange have had from beyond the arc, which is a problem in college basketball 2024.
Syracuse is the worst 3-point shooting team in all of the power conferences. And Saturday was the first game they didn't make a 3 since 2014. 10 years. 10 freaking years without a 3-pointer.
So let's break this down then, Ian, because I'm curious to hear your take on this. Like, how does it get better? Because the guys you have on your roster are the guys you have on your roster, right? Like, you can only make so much out of what, like, these players can't overnight mold into lights out 3-point shooters. But is it a philosophical thing? Is it a numbers game of, hey, I want to hit 15, I want to take at least 15 3-pointers every game, and we have to instill that and we have to hit that number, and if we don't, it's a problem? Is it a touch and go feel based on a game plan, scout? Like where do you go from here?
Well, it starts with identifying who your shooters are. And without your best player on the floor, your shooters are going to see better defenders. Right? Think about it as like a bunch of stairs. When JJ Starling is knocked off that top stair, everyone else has to take a step up. But guess who's standing on the other stair? It's the best defender on the team. So Chris Bell isn't seeing, in a man-to-man situation, Chris Bell isn't seeing Notre Dame's third best defender. He's getting their second best defender. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You love for a guy to get hot and hit a couple. I mean, that was Elijah Moore against Tennessee. But you can't count on that every single time. And Chris Bell is someone you have to count on. You look at the game log, Johnny, it's pretty ugly. 27% on the season. And we knew he was streaky. And as he tries to expand his game, I would think there's a bit less of a focus on the 3-point shot in practice or just in off-season workouts, right? He's working on other stuff. But if he loses that 3, the rest of his game is not much of a factor.
Yeah, and I think for me, the frustrating part of it is you use the word streaky, and that's a word that very much applies to Chris Bell, and Orange fans have known that for a while. I think I just had this hope coming into this year that he wouldn't be hit with that same label now as a junior, right? Okay, freshman year, sophomore year, you can get away with that. Ebbs and flows, right? But junior year, veteran on this team, guy who's seen some serious run, right? It's not like he was a reserve rotational piece. Like, no, Chris Bell was a big piece last year. He is a junior now, right? Is it that out of bounds to expect a little more consistency? I don't think so. Apparently, it is too much to ask. And you feel for him to an extent because now with the Starling injury, he's expected to pick up the mantle and score more, right? He's naturally one of the guys you turn to. And now not only is he being asked to do new things, you mentioned it last episode, how they're trying to get him going with more off the bounce and off the dribble, but he didn't even have the things that he was doing well previously working in the first place. It's like when you're in high school math or you're in calculus and, you struggle with unit 1, you struggle with unit 2, and you never really get that foundational sense. By the time you're on unit 10, oh boy, you're in trouble because you
This
don't
is a
have
math
that
tutor
foundation.
speaking. This is a former math tutor speaking, folks. He knows
It
what he's talking
is.
about.
And that's where I feel like Chris Bell is at right now. And you can't you can't make those leaps and bounds and make those adjustments in December. You got to make them in the off season, and it doesn't feel like we got that.
Yeah, the other problem is how do you create 3-point shots? Well, one, it starts with off ball movement, whether it's passing and cutting, whether it's screens and sets for shooters. And then what we talked about after the Tennessee game was Eddie Lampkin and Eddie Lampkin's ability to create and be an offensive conduit. Again, it's just another dud game from Lampkin. Even though he played more and yeah, he had a couple assists, but it doesn't feel like he is getting going. He is not having the impact on these games that we saw him have in the NCAA tournament last year. And I don't know if that's a fit thing. I don't know if that's a who's got the ball thing. I don't know if that's a play calling thing from the bench. But Colorado was really successful in dumping it down there and just letting Lampkin go to work. Maybe the book's out on him now. But whatever it is, that is a great way to generate 3-pointers. Kick it inside, draw a double, and then swing it back out and move it around the perimeter until someone gets an open shot. Lampkin thing, since he is not really scoring by himself, he might not get a double team. And then if he is getting doubled, you kick it out, and you've only got one guy, two guys that are really confident in that 3-point stroke. Well, that's why you take 9 attempts a game, regardless of what you're running to get a 3-point look, or regardless of how you've scouted the Notre Dame defense. Well, the Notre Dame scout is scouting you too. So the stuff you run eventually might not work. And a good post player, you can't scout that. I mean, we talked about DJ Burns. Like, you can't scout that if the guy is just better than you. But I don't know if Lampkin's there.
Couple final notes before we tie a bow on the Irish. And again, for those of you wondering, Syracuse will see this Notre Dame team again. Will they have JJ Starling back by then? I don't know. So it might be a very similar script, a very similar style of game when the Irish visit the JMA Dome on January the 18th, which will be here before you know it. But as far as this round one game out in South Bend, from a Notre Dame standpoint, kind of what we expected, right? It was the Braden Shrewsbury show. He had 25, nobody else more than 15. He was a high volume shooter. He knocked down 6 threes. He was dynamic on both ends, and Syracuse didn't really appear to have too many answers for him whatsoever.
And he's not afraid to shoot. He has the green of green lights.
No, not afraid to shoot at all. And then another game where Syracuse is in the minus on the rebounding battle. And again, for a team where, Eddie Lampkin is one of the real focal pieces and supposed to be the guy. And I know it's not all on him, but it just feels like with each passing game where you're in the negative on the rebounding column, more and more blame can be attributed to Syracuse's bigs. Any closing thoughts on Notre Dame here, Ian, before we shift gears to the Orange and the Great Danes of UAlbany out of the America East? That is tonight on ESPN2, I believe. 7 o'clock tip, a little upstate New York action for you. Things to know about UAlbany. They're 6-4. They haven't played an America East game yet. Their non-conference is somewhat interesting. They took down a real solid Columbia team out of the Ivy League by double digits, but they got crushed by Georgetown. They lost to BU in overtime as of recently. They did take down Jerry McNamara's Siena, but a loss to Army in their season opener. So kind of a mixed bag of results as far as what you're getting with what the Great Danes bring to the table. But Ian, I think from our vantage point and for most of our listeners' vantage point, as much as we do care about UAlbany, we don't even really care about UAlbany that much from their standpoint. This is a Syracuse, hey, let's focus on us. Let's do our thing. Let's make sure we defend home court and get really a much needed win.
Didn't I just go on the focus on us rant
yes.
2 episodes ago?
Yes.
Man, All right.
But we're still here. We're still here.
Yes, we're still here. They lost to Georgetown by 32. It was 100-68. And UAlbany's given up 80 or more points in 3 of their last 4 games. We talk about Syracuse in the low 300s in terms of shooting. Well, UAlbany is in the 300s in terms of both 2-point defense and 3-point defense percentage-wise. This is a game where if you have a problem scoring the ball,
it's sounding alarm time.
It's a bit more than, all right, we don't have our best player. UAlbany's best players are 6'7", 6'8" in the post. Yeah, maybe this is a game where Jair Davis has to play a lot again. But I'd really love to see Lampkin get going for everyone's sake. I think you establish him early, throw it down there, and make these guys defend him. Their best offensive player, Johnny, I've watched one game of UAlbany. Actually, it was that Siena game, and Justin Neely went off. He's 6'6", 210, matchup problem. Doesn't exactly shoot it that well, but he's like that undersized 4 that'll post you up and really go to work. And he's got his spin move off the post is really nice. So I don't exactly know who's guarding him from a Syracuse perspective, but they better handle him. Amari Marshall, Byron Joshua, the other names to know. And DeMar Langford is on this team. I don't know how he still has eligibility, but former Boston College Eagle. Johnny and I broadcast one of his games against Syracuse. What was it, back in 2022?
Believe so. Late 2021, early 2022. Yes. Yeah. Needless to say, it was a while ago.
Yeah. We were in Conti Forum, high in one of the hockey boxes, and we were on the original home of the Orange, WAER. But yes, DeMar Langford is playing on this UAlbany team. And that's pretty much what it is. A bunch of dudes that are 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". They don't exactly push the pace, but they will capitalize on transition opportunities. You can just tell by the scores. A whole lot of games in the 80s and 90s for this UAlbany team.
Yeah, the 4 guys you mentioned, all in double figures, too. So it's not a one-trick pony. They do have different guys that can get a hoop. It's just a matter of which one is going to show up on any given night. If there is any silver lining, it is that Syracuse, as far as on this season so far, you look at some of the splits home road-wise, they haven't lost on the Dome court. 4 games at home, 4 wins. I know you don't want to read into that a ton with who they've played, but when the Orange have been in front of their home crowd, good things happen. And one other quick UAlbany note for you here. They do average over 10 steals per game, which, as per what I am reading, at least when this was released from the UAlbany Athletics Department, is top 15 in the nation. So this is a team that defensively you would think is going to do a nice job clogging the passing lanes, active hands, and again, no J.J. Starling. That's a lot of dribbles to be taken by other guards, by other forwards even. How do the Orange respond? And does UAlbany really swarm them with a lot of ball pressure? Could we see a lot of that? Time will tell. Game is tonight, 7 o'clock. It is on ESPN 2, so no excuse not to be able to find it as far as any streaming or any blackouts or anything like that. Should be nice and accessible. After that, Georgetown, that's this weekend, so that'll be a big pod coming up as we preview that Saturday afternoon game at 2:30. That is a home game for Syracuse as well. So Red Autry squad maybe going through it a little bit right now, but I'm sure they're happy to be sleeping in their own beds and being on campus in Central New York. Enjoy the game tonight. Could not sign off the podcast today without flexing a little New York Mets apparel as the Blue and Orange do grab Juan Soto. Good times in Queens, not so much right now in Syracuse. Hopefully good times to come sooner rather than later. Thanks so much for hanging with us. Johnny and Ian signing off. We will talk to you later this week to preview Georgetown. Oh boy, get ready.